In 1938, the bobcat pin was first introduced in Cub Scouting. Did you know it was not meant to be worn on the uniform? Hey, thanks for joining me here on the ScouterStan channel. I'm ScouterStan, and let's talk a little bit about Cub Scouting's history. It is fascinating. And before we really get into that, I want to personally thank everyone that joined me for the last live meeting we had. We have another one coming up. I'll put it up there. The next one is on November 6th, and it's at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join us for the live meeting. There you can ask questions. I'll read them, and then I'll answer them. I'm getting better and better at putting that together. The last one was a little tricky. It's been shaky. It's been a learning curve for me. And being the old dog, it takes a while. But please join us for that. We have a great time. So definitely do that. And also, I want to thank all the patrons that are joining in and helping financially support the channel. And of course, the channel members. Those are people that are joining here on YouTube. Now, each one has their own benefits. Find out more. Now, Cub Scouting history is fascinating. It is amazing to me, all of the neat information that I was able to research. There's a gap, and we'll talk about it. But, things like the bobcat pin, things that we take for granted. A lot of leaders in troops, crews, and ships tune out. You shouldn't. You should listen carefully, because this is history of scouting, of a facet of scouting that most of your scouts come from. They understand a little bit more about all of the rank requirements within Cub Scouts, all of the structure that's involved. You need to know a little bit about it too. So please don't tune out. This video, even though it's specific on Cubs, it is for all scout leaders. Now, shortly after scouting started in 1910, there was a group of founders that were trying to get younger youth involved, to get younger boys into scouting. This was a big undertaking that Ernest Seton actually started. Now, he tried to put together an organization of Cub Scouts of America. Now, there was some opposition to this because they wanted to be just the Boy Scouts of America, which were the older youth that they were trying to service. And they were just getting started. This is 1911, okay, when Seton actually came out with this program. Now, James E. West wasn't really trying to get the really young youth involved when they were trying to focus on just establishing scouting. So he kind of tabled everything, and there was some bad feelings between Seton and West. So there was some issues there, but they worked things out, and they just tabled it for a little while. Now, the founder in 1916 put out a book for Wolf Cubs. This was for the younger youth of Britain to really get started in that Cub Scout mode. Now, this book was based on the Jungle Book story from Rudyard Kipling. So Wolf Cubs actually used a lot of that as the inspiration. A lot of the titles that were given in the book were also used in Wolf Cubs. Now, by 1918, the BSA had decided to start doing experiments and work on developing a program for younger youth. Now, in 1930, the very first Cub Scout packs were actually being commissioned and starting in 1930. Now, Cub Scouts at that time was using the Jungle Book, but they were mixing in a lot of the American native Indian lure that was popular in the day. They were mixing that in also. This was an effort to make it more relatable to 1930s youth that were fascinated by the Wild West. Now, what made this very unique is that den chiefs, youth from troops, were actually expected to join a pack as the leader for a den. It was going to be youth-led of younger youth. Now, I'm big on den chiefs. I think den chiefs are the best thing that scouting has, and I highly recommend it. I will put a link up there. That is the den chief video that's on our channel, so please check that out after this. In the 1930s, the pack was known as Webelos. Now that was amazing to me. Today, we call it a Cub Scout pack. It's not Webelos. Webelos had a totally different meaning. It was the very first letters of wolf, bear, lion, and scouts. Den assignments with the den chiefs was based on age. 9-year-olds would be in the wolves, 10 years old would be in the bears, and of course 11 would be in the lions. If they were 12, they were expected to go directly to a troop. Now, as you would imagine, pretty quickly by 1932, it was necessary to put some adult leadership into these dens. They started a program called Den Mothers. Now, the Den Mother was there a lot like a scoutmaster. You know, they would be in the background. They would help the youth run the den. That's kind of the process in the 30s. Now, by 1938, the Bobcat pin was introduced. This was to give all the different ranks a progress of how they would actually utilize the Bobcat for coming in, just like they do today, and going through wolf, going through bear, and going through the lion program. That's how all the scouts went, and it was based on age. So if you were joining as in the bear den, you still had to do your bobcat, you still had to do your wolf and your bear to get up to speed, so that when you moved on to lions, you could do that too. So it was a very intense program. There was 4 individual ranks in the Cub Scouting in the 30s. Now, in 1941, the Boy Scouts of America introduced the Webelos Award. Now, this was a patch that we would recognize today. It's the arrow with the 7 points raised over it. That is the Webelos Award from 1941 that was introduced. It was meant to go with lions. You actually would earn your lion and then move into your scouting skills. You would actually start some of the basic scouting skills to earn your Webelos Award. Now, by 1949, the den mother became more of the leader of the den than the den chiefs. So they were needed and they were still used, but they weren't expected to do the leadership job that the den mothers are now doing in 1940. In 1953, the very first Pinewood Derby happened in California. The pack had a wonderful time with it, and it caught on like crazy. Now, in 1954, the Bear Handbook at the time actually described Webelos differently. Webelos now stood as an acronym for We Will Be Loyal Scouts. In 1957, the Scouts started to desegregate a lot of the packs. Segregation was the law of the land at the time, and they were actually forefront of desegregating a lot of the packs. In 1959, the Bobcat rank or pin became one word. It became Bobcat. And this was allowed on the uniform. Now in 1967, they changed the Lion program. They phased that out for the Webelos program. Now in 1972, the Bobcat was actually incorporated as a joining type of recognition. This Bobcat recognition, they knew the law of the pack, they knew the pack oath, they knew all of the basics, a lot like a scout would know in a troop. So it was kind of incorporated for everyone joining the pack to achieve the Bobcat. Now in 1973, they started to phase out the den mother role. They were switching it to a den leader. Men were now allowed to be den leaders. Now with scouting, when they phase something out like that, they don't tell people that they're no longer doing that. What they do is that anyone getting in can't become a den mother. Okay, so what they did was they just left it. To this day, there are volunteers that are still den mothers from that time. In 1980, the Cub Scouts celebrated its 50th anniversary. Now in 1982, Cub Scouts introduced a new program called Tiger. Tiger was very unique. It's where first graders, along with their parents, can participate in a Cub Scout pack. In 1986, they started to reorganize how the dens were assigned. Originally it was by age. Now they wanted to do it by grade in school. Now this whole thing took about 5 years to actually phase in slowly, following the scouts as they progressed. As the Cub Scouts would go through the different positions, different dens, they were changing that structure behind them. Now throughout the 1990s and the 2000s, there was a very streamlined process. There was some changes with the books. There was some of the naming was changed a little bit. There was some little changes, but nothing significant as far as the program. In 2005, that was the 75th anniversary of Cub Scouting. Now, I remember that one. I was actually a Cub Master around that time, and I had several camporees that were Cub Scouts and troops that were separated, of course, but they actually were like overnight, like family camp with troop camporees and all that stuff to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Cub Scouting. Now, of course, Scouting, which is under, you got Cub Scouts, which is part of it, and it's all of the different units are under Scouting, had its 100th anniversary in 2010. Now in 2013, they did some restructuring on the adult leader knots for Cub Scouts. I have a video there that actually explains a little more about those knots. I believe they're in there just for reference. They've been what they call deprecated. That means you can't earn them, but you can earn similar to, and the requirements are a little different. If you've earned them already, you get to wear them for the rest of your uniform's life. That's the thing about those knots. Those are permanent, and it's covered in the video. Now in 2015, they actually went about changing from the Cub Scouts having its own Cub Scout promise and the law of the pack. They were changing it to the Scout oath and the Scout law. That was the big thing. They did this across the board. They wanted to do it with the troops, of course, had it already, and then you got Cub Scouts that also needed that. So it was amazing how this transition happened very quickly, very quickly. And I think it's for the better. Now, in 2017, they started to introduce girls into Cub Scouts. Girls could join Cub Scouts within their school grade. That's the den they would go to. That was very new, and each pack through the charter could make the decision of having girl dens. So this was new. A lot of charters wanted to bring in the girls so that more parents can participate. You have brother and sister, mom and dad, you want to get everybody involved. Scouting is about family, and especially Cub Scouts. In 2018, they actually brought something back. That's rare for Scouts. They brought lions back, but not for Weeblos. That's where it was. They brought lions back for kindergarten youth. Now in 2020, we had the COVID shutdown. A lot of packs did not make it through. That was really devastating for Cub Scouting. Cub Scouting is the largest portion of U.S. Scouting. It is the largest membership of involvement in Scouting. And unfortunately, we lost about 43% of Scouts in Cub Scouting, of the packs that were there. Very few made it through. I had 3 packs in 2019 as a unit commissioner, and by the end of 2020 I only had 1. So 2 of them, established for 40 plus years, gone. So it was devastating. It was very devastating. And unfortunately, there are Cub Scout age youth out there begging to get back involved in Cub Scouts. Who blame? I mean, come on. Cub Scouts is great. There's so much fun going on. That is unfortunate because we just don't have the units. So if you're thinking about starting a unit, I would hope it's a Cub Scout unit. If you're thinking about getting involved, please do so. This channel is meant for adult leaders, and I tell you, it is so much fun seeing America's youth enjoy Cub Scouting. Now, they don't stay Cub Scouts forever. They eventually move, they age as they go from den to den, and then eventually they cross over into a troop. A lot of troops out there will be more than welcoming for any of your Cubs. And this is true throughout all of Cub Scouting. Now, hopefully by 2030, we're going to be celebrating the 100th anniversary of Cub Scouting. And I would think it would be wonderful if you could get involved in your local pack. Now, I hope you enjoyed sort of a highlights of history with Cub Scouting. Cub Scouting is fascinating. There's so many things going on through history and even today. Get involved. Scout leaders everywhere. I want to personally thank you for working so hard for America's youth, for our benefit, for the future, okay? That's the wonderful thing. Keep up that hard work. I know it's tough. I know it's hard. There's always difficulties, and you just have to stay the course. Live by the Scout Oath and Scout Law. It will become much easier, much better. And we are doing good work, and you are doing great work. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for all you do, and I will see you on the trail.